I was like 5 minutes into recording this video, and then I realized I didn't turn the microphone on, so I'm recording a second take of this video, but you probably don't notice any difference. But anyway, today I have a bit of a sensitive topic that I kind of want to talk about toxic masculinity, but it's not really about toxic masculinity. So, let me explain the context behind why I decided to make this video. I've been a personal life coach working with clients for a little over 3 years now. And throughout this time, I have been very lucky and fortunate to work with many, many, many precious clients. My clients are from all ages and genders and situations and such, right? I've worked with young men, sexually frustrated, or having trouble with dating. I worked with people about to be married. I have worked with transgender people. I have worked with people just married. I have worked with people about to have children. I have worked with people whose children are growing up. I have worked with people whose children are adults. I have worked with people who are divorced. I have worked with people who are contemplating divorce. I have worked with people who are in their elderly years with their spouse passing away. So I've encountered humans with lots of different situations. And now, it is in the nature of a human's life that we form relationships. And of course, we want the relationships to be nourishing, and we want them to be beneficial to our lives because we are social creatures after all, right? So sometimes we luck out. Sometimes relationships are just that compatible. And it just kind of works without you putting a lot of work into it. The relationship is very low maintenance. Both of you are happy. Great. But chances are you will come into conflict with people, especially the people you love the most, the people you decide to form a loving relationship with and maybe a family with. And when trouble starts brewing, in general, based on my many, many observations, I find that it comes from unresolved and undiscovered and unowned masculinity. Now, but the thing is, this makes it sound like I'm attributing all the blame to the men. So, we need to contextualize this a little bit better. What do I mean by unowned and mismanaged and I don't know, basically maybe toxic masculinity? What do I mean by this? You are a human being. You are an individual. So you are going to have your opinions about what is valuable to you and what is not valuable to you. What I mean is you're going to have a value system. So you might be a very aesthetic person, so you might appreciate the beautiful and fine things in life. You might be a very practical person, so you don't really care about the design, you just care about is it practical or not. You might be a very extravagantly, flamboyant person. And to you, like maximalism is very important. So just like this, individuals can have different preferences, different value systems. What's valuable to me, what's not valuable to me. But because we are human beings, we live in a society and we live in a communal kind of space. And that means we are likely to have consensus around what is valuable to us as a society. So, we have multiple versions of this throughout history. In the very primitive days, power meant everything. So, the most powerful person is likely to become the chief. The most powerful person is most likely to rule the area. Then we have some era of where we value holiness. So societies form around clergy people and shamans and spiritual people who hold a lot of reverence in the community. And right now, we're kind of in a capitalist era, right? So when we are rich, when we have a lot of money, then we get respect. We are seen as valuable and powerful in our society. The thing is, with any and every social value system, there's the opposite of valuable. So, if we value having lots of money, then that means not having a lot of money, being poor, is kind of bad. If we live in a society where power is valued over everything, if you're weak, then you're kind of fucked, right? So, depending on what we value, they're going to be marginalized people, right? That's just how power dynamics work. Now, over time and over the multiple iterations of society, we have gotten to value manhood over womanhood. Society in general revolved around men. And this is clearly evidenced by females not having voting powers, whereas the foundation and the beginning of democracy is men having power to vote, right? So, across many different cultures, equal voting rights came fairly later. And that's because women were generally seen as inferior. Now, this seems like this is good for all men. And this seems like this is bad for all female. But this kind of a model of masculinity and the male superiority ends up also hurting men. Why? Because we are humans living in a society. And that means we can conform to some areas of society, but at the same time, we can have individual preferences that deviate from it. So, what if I am a rich person, but I'm very weak and frail, and I am otherwise very marginalized? So, yes, I'm rich. I do have a lot of money, but in other value systems, I rank very low. Or I might be a very creative person and I might be a great influencer, but I might be living at the brink of poverty. Or I might be the strongest person in the world, but in my society where religion is very important, I'm an atheist, or I believe in another minority religion, so I'm prosecuted. Or I'm a racial minority in a largely homogeneous society, and so I'm marginalized. Just like this, being a man, right? It's supposed to be good, but many people find that they don't really match 100% to the ideal man. And this brings about a lot of suffering, right? Particularly around topics like baldness and like that, chin jawline or like fitness. And that's why you see a great amount of people engaging in TRT these days, right? So, what does it really mean to be a man? What does it mean to be a socially valued man? And I keep deviating from it. This causes a lot of suffering to men. But at the same time, we, we have to see that this issue is fairly nuanced, right? We have to generally see that from the female perspective, it is reasonable to say that men generally have it better because throughout history, men didn't really have to fear being kidnapped and then attacked and completely overpowered by females, right? So you see arguments like how when females starts having guns, they start feeling like, oh, is this what it feels like to be a man? Because they understand what it feels like to be powerful. So I'm taking excerpts from all these like quotes and researches I've read over the years. But what I'm saying is, I'm not trying to pigeonhole you into one argument. In fact, I'm trying to expand the horizon so that we can view this from a holistic lens. Because from the general female perspective, in this day and era, being the stereotypical man is kind of a boo. But at the same time, historically, manhood has been said to be valuable. But at the same time, not every man is completely matching with the idea of the ideal man, because that also changes throughout time. So, but the ironic thing is, after all, why do men care about being manly? Because it's valuable, right? Then why is it valuable? Why is being a man valuable? It's because ultimately it's what allows you to perform the masculine role so that you can integrate with the female to become a member of society in an established familial pattern. So now we find ourselves trying to ascribe this model that is supposedly good at attracting women. But then the more we do this, now the cultural zeitgeist is that the more you do this, the more it gives you the ick, so to speak, right? But the thing is, these are very nuanced arguments. And these are topics that require quite a bit of introspection. Why? Because we are used to thinking in absolutes. We are used to thinking in black or white. We are used to thinking about seeing ourselves as one entity with like one quality. But in reality, I am a Korean person living in America. So when my fellow Koreans and I are fighting against Asian hate in America, in that way we can be united. But then the thing is, I don't necessarily agree with all the political opinions that are available in Korea. So a fellow Korean American here may have a very different political view about I don't know, North Korea, and may believe something different from how I think the North Korean situation should be handled. So in that case, yes, in the grand American sense, we are the same. We are one. But at the same time, we are different. But because we are so used to this all or nothing, we get into silly arguments. Like, why are you this way? You have to be this way. You have to conform to what I think. Right? But that is forgetting that, yes, in this one thing, while I am part of you, I'm allowed to be different. And allowed aside, the reality is I am different from you. Right? And to just openly think, when I suppose I look at a white person and I think, oh, that guy's a white guy, and he probably or she doesn't understand anything about being an Asian. So this is me being prejudiced by our difference, right? What if she lived 10 years in Korea and like knows more about contemporary Korea than me, because I haven't been in Korea and I haven't lived in Korea in over 10 years, right? So when I let the difference get in front of me, when I get into the biased view of difference, then I fail to see that how other people and I can have unity. But when I'm blinded by unity, I fail to see how people can be different from me. But we normally don't think of the world, we normally don't think of society and our participation in it in this kind of a lens. We are more and more cornered and pigeonholed into one opinion, because YouTube algorithm, Instagram algorithm, TikTok algorithm keeps on wanting to feed us the same thing that we are enthusiastically agreeing on, or the same rage bait that makes us angry. So we don't see how polarized we are becoming. And based on my experience with clients, I want to tell you what that naturally kind of leads down to if we don't think about these things. The more you engage in a relationship and coupling and the marriage together, the more your differences will be pronounced. The more it will be difficult for you to continue to see your oneness. Why? because you start with oneness. That's what prompts a relationship. That's what prompts a marriage in the first place. But what happens to things that are new? What happens to any kind of stimulus that we come into? We get used to it. So when we noticed our commonalities and when we noticed our similarities and when we were so happy about being compatible, over time, that becomes a given. We start taking it for granted. And what sticks out like a sore thumb or like a prick in the side is our differences. And sooner or later, the differences become unbearable. And ultimately, in marriage, you normally end up sharing similar ideas and similar value systems around home economics and finances. If not, you would end up in a divorce or you would break up. Or all the other values like religion, right? It may sometimes be a deal breaker and then marriages can just end that way. But when all the other value systems are kind of compatible, ultimately the last difference that you will need to overcome eventually as a couple is the gender difference. What happens then is the difference is seen as an attack on the identity. But if I don't know why I choose to participate as a stereotypical male, when I don't really feel like one, when I don't really resonate with being one, if I'm really being honest, but I keep wanting to be the strong person in front of my friends. I keep wanting to talk down on my wife when I'm in front of other people. I keep wanting to be like the alpha male without really thinking about why though. It's gonna end up souring the relationship. But the same thing applies for the female in the marriage and the relationship as well. So, ultimately, why do I need to play the female role? Why do I need to continue to participate in this hierarchical relationship when when I don't agree with that, when I at times where I think rationally about things? So when both parties don't really think about what actual role we want to play in the relationship, then because of the pronounced differences, it usually ends up in big marital troubles. And I'm talking like physical violence. I'm talking substance abuse. I'm talking about mental illness. These are things that I have actually worked with over many different couples. And the generalization is, while other things can be compatible, if we don't think about our manhood, if we don't think about our femalehood, there comes a point where that difference is ultimately going to be a deal breaker. But then what's the point of this video? The point is, we like to name it toxic masculinity, but it isn't really exclusively about males. We all have a responsibility for ourselves, regardless of what societal norms say. What kind of a person do I want to be? What kind of a person do I feel comfortable in my skin being? And in a relationship with the person I happen to love right now, what kind of a role do I actually want to be playing outside of what society tells me to do? So, what if I actually am very much okay with making less money than my wife? And What if my wife is actually fine being the breadwinner? In that case, we may still feel that little bit of social resistance. Like, I'm embarrassed to admit this to my parents or my family or my social network. But in the end, it is your acceptance in social communities more important than your individual happiness? Now, I'm not saying this in a judgmental tone because sometimes when you don't feel safe in society enough, you actually need to feel safe first. You need to procure your safety first. And then you can branch out into your, excuse me, own individual happiness, right? But I don't think we think about these things enough in the way that I described. We don't see ourselves as part of a society, but also an individual. We don't think about the value systems that we inherited. And we don't question, is this actually worth it though? For example, many people are born into religions. So they just kind of accept that God, but they rarely sat down and actually thought about, do I actually believe in a God? Does this really make sense to me? And you might have a very athletic parent and they might want you to thrive in sports. I don't know, Tony Soprano, do you want they want you to be a varsity athlete. But then what if you don't enjoy athletics? So just like this, all the things that society values, do I necessarily value it? Do I want to continue upholding this? We don't think about these things enough. And today, it's kind of grim, but it's sort of a warning coming from the real cases that I have seen over the past 3 years. And if you're a young, regardless of whether you're a young person or an old person or whatever age in between, these are things that you can start considering in your days today. What do I hold valuable? What do I think about the societal values? What do I, in with my partner, with my spouse, what are we one in? But also with my spouse and with my partner, what do I need to recognize as a legitimate difference that I need to accept? And the more you sit down together to talk about these things, the more likely it is that you are going to continue having a stable and solid and healthy relationship with your loved